All right, good day all. Great to have you joining us today. I want to introduce for you Carl Guardino, our VP of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Tarana, who will get us started here right now.
Stephen Glappa, thank you and welcome to everyone. We're honored that you're investing some time with us today. Today's team in our interactive conversation is our CEO, Basil Alwan of Tarana Wireless, the Chief Strategy and Legal Officer for NextLink Internet, Claude Aiken, the CEO of Digital C in Cleveland, Ohio, Joshua Edmonds, and myself, Carl Guardino, Vice President of Government Affairs and Policy. We're delighted to have you with us this morning because, as we all know, we have an amazing opportunity to meet a tremendous challenge in the United States. Let's level set on that challenge and opportunity. According to the FCC Broadband Fabric Map, today in the United States, we have 5,985,847 unserved locations. We have another 2,833,161 underserved locations. And since the average household size in America is 3.1 people per household, that's as many as 27,338,924 Americans that are depending on all of us to get this right so that we finally bridge the digital divide for all American families and locations. The exciting news, we can do this as we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do so. As we look at BEAD, the federal funds, $42.45 billion, to apply to our efforts in 50 states, DC, and 5 US territories, we can't forget that BEAD favors fiber. Let me repeat that. It favors fiber. It is not a mandate for fiber. It also requires covering all unserved and underserved locations and families. That is the primary goal of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the BEAD funding. While these two mandates seem to be, in some cases, at odds in some states, the NTIA is reminding states and territories the #1 goal is 100% universal service. And we believe that Tarana's next generation fixed wireless access technology is a reliable complement to fiber. Remember, it's fiber and we want to help all of us meet that goal. A little bit of the origin story of Tarana Wireless. Founded at UC Berkeley 15 years ago by 3 young PhD graduate students who met in the International House. They wrote their PhD thesis together. How do we serve impoverished villagers in Ghana, in Africa, where none of them were from? Well, they got an A on their PhD thesis and they started a company, which is what we do here in the innovation economy in the United States. 15 years and nearly 500 million in privately funded research and development later, and lots of near-death experiences, those 3 young PhDs have grown to 27 PhDs, 300 engineers, 400 employees, all of our intellectual property in the United States, all of our manufacturing conducted by 2 US headquartered companies, all in North America, and 450 employees overall. Our next generation fixed wireless access technologies have only been available on the market for 11 quarters, less than 3 years. In that short amount of time, we are serving families in 24 countries, 47 states, 1 of every 10 counties in the United States, with nearly 300 ISP partners, 60 million homes passed, adding 1,500 to 2,000 families every single week. And the reason, this groundbreaking technology, without ever having to break ground, is revolutionary. Things always are impossible until someone makes them possible. And to talk about those technologies, let me turn it over to our CEO, Basil Alwan.
Thank you, Carl. Appreciate it. Yes. So first of all, BEAD is a really interesting program. There's been a lot of federal programs and state programs to try to close the divide. The divide's been very tough to close, and one of the things that we noticed here at Tarana is that, and I think is an interesting point, is that every time we add one more family to the right side of the digital divide, the remainder gets even tougher because the low-hanging fruit is always done first. So we have a really tough challenge ahead here. And that's one of the reasons we think you're going to need to use multiple technologies. One key comment I want to make about where we are right now, the reason we're doing this webinar is that there's been a ton of work done on BEAD in the last couple of years since it was created as law, as a bill and a law, and that has led to this moment where we're finally at a stage where states are getting through what's called Volume 2. And Volume 2 is really when the clock starts for the states to get the bidding process going, pre-qualification, bidding, and ultimately award proposals. And there's actually a shot clock on that. When a state gets Volume 2 approved, they have a year to basically provide a proposal back to the NTA with all of the bidders and the plan to spend the money and get the divide closed. A year seems like a long time, but it's actually, if you think about it, not really that long when you consider you have to get first bids, figure out if you meet the dual mandate, work maybe multiple rounds of negotiation, make sure you pre-qualify, you should have said that up front. So there's the key point of this slide is now is the moment. If you're thinking about BEAD, if you're thinking about applying for BEAD, it's a game on in 10 states. 10 states so far have gotten through Volume 2. The remainder of the 56 states and territories will get through Volume 2 in the remainder of this year, in all likelihood. And so it is really the year of BEAD bidding and awards. So Carl mentioned that it's a fiber. The first focus is on fiber. If there was a way with the dollars awarded to do all fiber, we'd be done. We would just fiber every location and everybody would be happy. The challenge, of course, is that fiber is super expensive. This is the BEAD hierarchy. If you haven't taken the time to look at it, there's 3 classifications: priority, non-priority, and alternative. And they are awarded in that order. So fiber is number 1, it's a priority. Non-priority technologies are not all technologies. You can't just do any fixed wireless. You have to use licensed fixed wireless. And by rule, the NTIA has concluded that licensed fixed wireless includes CBRS, both PALs and GAAs, if you're familiar with those terms. So all CBRS is a good candidate for this. Any other licensed fixed wireless is also a candidate for this. Alternative technologies are only awarded if the state cannot get fiber and non-priority technologies deployed, at which point they can step into alternative, and that includes satellite and unlicensed fixed wireless. So of course, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but fiber, the challenge is going to be that fiber is super expensive, and this is a really interesting study we did that's available on our website. If you go to resources, you can find it. And we took 132 state-funded fiber projects, and these are completed projects so we know there are real data points across 5 states. And what we did is we kind of went and looked carefully at the maps as where they were deployed, and we plotted on this graph the density versus cost. And it's a logarithmic graph, otherwise this curve would be super steep. And what we can see is that this gets really expensive when you get to the less dense areas, much more expensive than perhaps the models say. We actually tried to model all the BEAD locations. At the time, the BEAD locations were there were a bit more of them, but still the number came in more than 6x, or actually just about 6x the $42.5 billion. So it's over $200 billion required if we use this approximation. Of course, nobody really knows because there's match. We, by the way, modeled match into that study. The study is available. All the numbers are available, including each state project where it is. So if you're interested in diving into it, feel free. However, the point is, we believe, and most people believe, that many states are going to be in a situation where they're going to struggle with a dual mandate. That is to say, do all fiber, but cover all homes. So the challenge is, you might say, well, why didn't the NTIA just say, hey, if you can do 100 by 20, use whatever technology you want, thereby the government would get the best deal possible. And I think one of the key points to remember is this is a government investment, taxpayer investment, and the theory here is that it needs to last. So there's an idea of reliable broadband to really help ensure that the divide doesn't reopen, because this is real. It can happen, and we want this to be a many year, if not permanent kind of solution to the problem. So obviously there's two ways that networks can over time get challenged: network performance degradation, or maybe an inability or unwillingness to meet growing demand. So the point here is that if you look at the second bullet, conventional high-scale wireless networks that are kind of in this mid-band area, point to multi-point, where they're providing many homes connectivity, are really challenged by these requirements. In the case of licensed mobile, the operators have to decide, how much to allocate, how much of their spectrum and the capacity they have on their existing base stations to allocate to fixed wireless. And fixed wireless takes 30 to 50 times the bandwidth of a mobile. And of course, if you look at the cost per bit, the mobile is 30 to 50 times higher, or more. So the point is that if you have contention in the mobile network, in the licensed mobile network, between a fixed wireless subscriber and a mobile subscriber, you will always pick the mobile subscriber. And of course, that may not be a problem up front, when you first deploy, but over time, as mobile demands continue to grow, and they are, you could imagine a situation where a service degrades. Same thing, a different issue, but same concern with purely unlicensed fixed wireless. Though Tarana has made some really big strides in making unlicensed reliable, and this is kind of a game changer. But at the time BEAD was put together, the concern on unlicensed was a risk of uncontrollable contention. Somebody showing up, putting some interference nearby you, and pretty soon you can't deliver what you intended to deliver. So, 5G is obviously one of the questions, and many states, can it be used to close BEAD? And, the cellular network can be used for BEAD. It's a licensed non-priority technology. However, you should be aware that many states have now classified, have actually kind of had this conversation, and there's 11 states that the NTIA has agreed with states when they decided that cellular coverage is eligible for BEAD funding. In other words, they've more or less said it's unserved from an NTIA point of view, from a BEAD point of view, if it's only covered by cellular. And so there's been some prior art here commenting on the concern about cellular, and over time whether or not it's a reliable technology. And second, states are recognizing that the issues are many. Capacity issues due to the cost and amount of spectrum. Certain, as I mentioned, mobile service priority when contention happens. Throttling users, which is something that's already happening in those networks. And then, of course, the last point here is uplink. And uplink is really key here. And 100 by 20 is the minimum that you need to deliver if you're going to win BEAD. On the other hand, you really, to score well on a BEAD bid, you want to do much more than that. And trying to deliver 20 megabits, let alone more than 20 megabits with cellular technologies is not obvious because of the way the system was built. Yeah, so the key point here, and we're going to kind of rush through this a bit because I want to get to the panel, but technology advances. And this is actually Carl's phone from his home. Carl, I think I got that right? This is your actual phone, if I remember right. It's not your phone today, though, if I understand correctly.
That was the phone at the Guardino house growing up.
It's awesome. And the point of the slide is just to say, look, every now and then, regularly in the world of technology, things change. What can be done is, or what the limits were before are no longer the limits. Yeah, so we don't have time for a deep dive. Of course, we're happy, and our engineering team is always happy to host people to really understand what's so different about our ngFWA technology. And in ngFWA, next generation fixed wireless, is what we term the approach that we're using. And the product that we sell is called Gigabit 1 or G1. Now, there's a bunch of diagrams here, and you might say this is just a bunch of scribble that we pulled from some script. This is actually relevant to what we do. We use a technology called distributed massive MIMO. And the best way to think about it is we put an incredibly intelligent device on the home. We had to cost reduce it to make it work, but we more or less put something there that's way more intelligent than classical fixed wireless systems. And what that gives us, it gives us a huge number of advantages. We can use multipath to our advantage as opposed to having it be a negative issue in most wireless networks. We collaborate on beamforming, which means we're being very careful about where we're sending and receiving energy. We eliminate really self-interference, which is unheard of in wireless technologies. The first time really it's been done as completely as Tarana does it with this technology. We can also cancel unlicensed interference. So it's a really different system. It's fundamentally different. The chips at the bottom are meant to say that this is not based on any existing Wi-Fi or cellular chip. It's a custom set of chips. That's why it took so long and took so much investment to really focus on home broadband and do home broadband better than has ever been done before with wireless in the mid-band especially. So what are the attributes we get out of that? We get fiber class performance, a network infrastructure that, by the way, is really identical to fiber. So you can lay it in. If you have a fiber network, you use the same BNG, use the same home router. It's a layer 2 infrastructure. So it's much easier than, let's say, a cellular technology to integrate with fiber. Uplink profiles that can all go all the way to symmetric without any reduced spectral efficiency. In other words, this system is, because of the intelligence on both ends of the link, has a equivalence in uplink and downlink if you want it. It's programmable, which is huge, right? It solves the uplink problem. Supports licensed and unlicensed and a blending of both, which is a new exciting area we're going into. High capacity per sector. So this is, I'm going to show you a few sectors in a minute. Rather than tell you what that means, I'm going to show you something that will, I think, convincingly show you what we can do with the technology. And again, we work in non-line of sight conditions because we use multipath really well, and we deal with interference, and of course we're weather impervious. It's a pretty simplified installation at the home too, because the node at the home is so intelligent. It helps you. You don't have to precisely point it. It's much easier than traditional fixed wireless to set up at the home and get up and running. Yeah, so this is a really nice graph, again, on our website that shows existing real links. This is 50,000 CBRS links. Now, CBRS is the non-priority or the second tier of the BEAD program, and so it's BEAD qualified. So these links you're seeing here, and these are live links, these are real links, so the numbers you're seeing here are real. You can see the x-axis is distance going all the way to 10 miles. And you can see the performance characteristics. So this is really high performance stuff, way above the 100 by 20 required by BEAD. So this is super impressive. This is all very real. We can walk you through any of this if you're interested in more details. But it shows the power and the reality of what this technology is delivering right now in the market. And our panelists, I think, will share a bit more on that. And I wanted to show a few sectors here as well, because one of the challenges with wireless is densification. Now, in BEAD, that may not be a huge challenge because many of the locations will not be super dense, but this makes a huge difference in economics. So if you have an area that has hundreds of potential households, you can do it with less towers. These are two real sectors. On the left, you see Visionary Broadband in Colorado. On the right, you see NextLink, who's one of our panelists today, in Texas. Both of these are done in CBRS, and these were taken at a snapshot in time. They may be slightly more or slightly less at this point, but these were real data points within the last 6 months or so. And what I'm showing here is the SLAs that have been sold on these links. Now, previous slide was showing the RF capacity of those links. Now I'm showing you kind of what are they actually selling. Visionary Broadband only offers 100 to 200 meg packages, and there you see 179 on a sector. And if you're familiar with wireless, that's traditionally not possible because the sector base node, what we call the base node, can't generally support that kind of densification. Partly it's the capacity of the sector, part of it is just the interference that occurs when you add more subscribers. And that's one of the magic things about Tarana is as you add more subscribers, you don't have this self-interference destructive situation where you can only get 30 or 40 or in some cases 10 or 12 and you run out of capacity. So there's a number of pinch points in the wireless network, and we solve those issues in the development of G1. On the right, you see NextLink, where they're offering an array of SLAs, and customers are buying 500 meg packages. And these particular sectors are running in a 4.5 to 1 downlink to uplink, but that's a programmable thing. So you can see on the NextLink case, we're offering really high-end, customers are offering 200, 300, and even 500 meg services. Clearly, this technology is well above and will score well in a BEAD hierarchy. So to kind of make this a little more concrete, even further, take a look at a difficult place. I mean, this is where you know you have a situation, and this is really indicative of what might happen in BEAD, where you have an incredibly expensive area to fiber. Maybe there's a restriction on aerial fiber, so you have to trench. It's around a lake in this particular place, this Clear Lake in California, and our partner Digital Path. And you can see we did a rough math on what it would have taken to do an aerial fiber model. This is presuming you can do aerial. If it's buried fiber, it's way worse, as many of you well know. And you can see the economic difference here. And I'll get to why this is so important. It's kind of obvious why it's important, but we're able to offer BEAD++ services. I mean, really, really good long-term solution, and save an intense amount of cash and time. And time is another key part of this.
Basil, thank you. And as we go into our panel, we are going to again show a video. What we're going to emphasize today is Tarana as a solution in our tribal communities, suburban, urban, and rural communities.
So we're here in Tohatchi today, and we had a monumental moment for this community. We had a ribbon cutting event where we celebrated the new technology that is coming on the Navajo Nation, Tarana.
In 2013, ngFWA built the fiber backbone that runs along Highway 491. As this build out was taking place, questions started as to when are we going to get internet? Well, it's taken over 10 years to answer those questions. We thank you for granting Tohatchi the chance to catch up with the rest of America.
This is the first true broadband capable of 100+ megabit speeds. Up until today, 9 meg has been the maximum, and so this truly is a technology with Tarana that is opening doors.
Fiber to the home is very expensive. The Navajo Nation, 27,000 square miles. This is the ideal solution. You could never substitute fiber, but this is going to come close to that, and this is the next best thing.
The main thing is to be able to work from home. Definitely improved my life, especially during the winter months. My daughter's able to be browsing the internet at the same time, and there's no slowdown. It's just been a very positive experience. The download speed and upload speed is just phenomenal. Nothing that we've been able to get out here in Tohatchi before.
Again, we want to broaden the conversation now with our panel. And we are delighted to have with us today Joshua Edmonds, CEO of Digital C, Claude Aiken, Chief Strategy and Legal Officer with NextLink Internet. And since we love all of our partners equally, we're going to go alphabetical, starting with Claude before Joshua in my alphabet. So we're going to start with Claude. And Claude, if I may, let's start with, please share with us the communities and the states that are served by NextLink Internet. And a little bit of the origin story, please.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, thank you, Carl, Basil, for having me on. It's a great story. It's a great opportunity to talk a little bit about the company and the technology, and more importantly, what it's doing for communities like you just heard about the Navajo Nation that up until this point haven't had quality, reliable broadband. So a little bit about NextLink. The company was founded about 12 years ago in small town Weatherford, Texas. Over the course of the past decade, the company's grown from sort of a tiny Texas wireless ISP to a multi-state next generation fixed wireless and fiber provider. We're in 8 states now and expanding to 12 over the course of the next year, and predominantly focused on rural areas. So if you look on the FCC's website about the map of our coverage, you don't see us covering downtown Dallas. You don't see us covering downtown Wichita. You don't see us covering downtown Omaha. We're focused on those communities that have been left without for way too long, and using whatever tool in the toolkit we can to get those folks served.
Claude Aiken, thank you. And as you serve your communities and families, why Tarana as a technology partner?
Because it's a fantastic solution for going great distances at relatively reasonable cost to get those folks served with high quality broadband. I mean, we can talk a little bit more about some of the specific projects that we've partnered with Tarana on, but from Basil showed a slide from our perspective. We're able to go up to 7 miles in rural Texas with up to 500 megabit speed with Tarana G1. That's something that would be impossible to cost effectively do with fiber without significant grant money, in which cases a lot of government grants are not willing to throw out that kind of cash for connections like that.
Claude, you mentioned specific projects and partnerships with Tarana, and I read in a government magazine recently about the work we're doing together to serve community and family in Weiss County, Texas. Can you tell us a little bit about the Weiss County partnership?
Absolutely, that's a pretty cool one, and one where we were able to partner with local county government in Wise, Texas. So for those of you who don't know the Texas geography, perhaps know it about as well as I did 3 years ago before I joined NextLink. Wise County is a largely rural county, just removed from Dallas. So if you looked at the FCC's broadband data back in 2022, you would see that by current BEAD standards, 100 by 20 terrestrial wired or licensed fixed wireless, about 68% of the county had access to what the FCC considers broadband. We partnered with the county to do a relatively low cost, so county contribution of about $1.3 million to do an ambitious project to blanket the entirety of the rural area with up to 500 megabit per second fixed wireless broadband over the course of 8 months. So you're talking relatively low cost, you're talking above FCC standards for broadband, and you're talking a time frame so that folks are able to access the kind of connectivity that's going to be life-changing compared to what we heard before. 1 to 2 megabit per second can't really do modern things with that kind of speed. So again, remember I said 68% covered in 2022. Once we completed our project, now the FCC's maps show that Wise County is 99.9% covered with broadband. And that puts it in a better connectivity metric than urban Dallas County just next door, which is just an amazing story of the power of good partners working together to get communities better connectivity. And as you mentioned, Carl, it's been written up. This project's received awards from the National Association of Counties. It's been written up in governing.com, and just last month, the Dallas Morning News editorial board lauded it as a template for future government spending on broadband. So we're very pleased about how that project has worked out. From a broad perspective, and more so just the difference that it's made in the lives of the folks living in rural Wise County.
Great.
So well, what's interesting, Carl, as a comment to Claudia, we're doing these in government projects. We're also doing these with you guys and with a bunch of providers that are fiber plus ngFWA in all kinds of non-government, just kind of the right way to deploy broadband. And one of the things that I really like, and I think, Joshua, you might comment on this also, is we're finding there's a lot of stranded streets in dense areas that just are left behind. It's kind of crazy. You think that, one street, fiber, and then nothing, and literally a very difficult time getting. So it's almost like with the combination, we can kind of cover, whether it's a government project or whether it's even a dense, free market project, we can get it done more effectively, more quickly, and still deliver end game broadband that really is going to stand the test of time, not a stopgap to fiber.
Basil, well said. And Joshua, let's warm up your vocal cords as well. Tell our webinar participants today a little bit about the visionary work of Digital C and a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, well, Basil, Carl, thank you on the Tarana side. Claude, thank you. You set the stage nicely. So Digital C, we are a nonprofit technology social enterprise. That's a mouthful to say that we are a 501c3 that is focused on revenue. And we do that by way of providing high-speed internet throughout the city of Cleveland. In addition, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the space that I'm in now is actually our headquarters. So we have a really cool headquarters space. So if you guys come out to Cleveland, we'd love to show you around. But what we're doing in Cleveland that I think is worth mentioning is, so we're working directly with Tarana and a number of other folks to deploying a ngFWA network all throughout the city. And so the speeds that we are advertising is 100/100 symmetrical at $18 a month. Now that $18 a month probably made everybody go like, what? And so once again, we're going to go back.
We want to sign up, I think, Joshua.
We're going to go back to the beginning and say this is a 501c3, so that's 501c3 math. But at $18 a month, 100/100. And the reason why that's important is for so long, Cleveland was one of those least connected cities that everyone would see. So this is really the urban digital divide materialized right in front of us to a degree in which you're going to have a third of residents every year, roughly in the city of Cleveland, who are subscriber vulnerable. And it's going to be a combination. One, it's going to be the price point. You know, on average, it's $70, especially as you all know, ACP going away, that highlighted the need even more. So it's almost prophetic what we're doing right now, because we started building before that went away. So Cleveland looks like wow, what foresight. So the terms that we agreed to, though, it's $18 for the next 10 years. So it's a really impressive terms that we agreed to. However, what this has done is, as we've been deploying, it's allowed us to take the fixed wireless discussion and put it center stage when you have so much interference throughout an urban city. We're called a forest city, so we have a lot of trees here. In addition to that, yes, we have the buildings, but we're deploying this network, and we agreed to do this in less than 18 months. And so right now, Cleveland is about 88 square miles. We have 176,000 households here. And right now, well, actually by the end of this month, as the sites that we're bringing on live, we're estimating that we'll have north of 55,000 homes passed based on our deployments in January. Now, admittedly, the winter was nice to us this year, so we've been a little bit ahead of schedule on that front, but it's the fact that we have reliable connections that we're deploying in many cases, where the point that, Basil, that you had raised about some of these streets not being connected in the urban cores, like, yes, that is absolutely the reality here. So now we have this flat network that's being deployed with speeds that are far greater than 100/100. We are going to be tiering, and it's our ability to now go from what we were before. We were primarily just a CBRS network before. I know that many of us wish those were kind of our origins, and it's great to see us grow from those smaller CBRS origins to now being a competitive carrier class network that allows us to legitimately compete. The last thing I'm going to say is we did receive a lot of funding, one from the state of Ohio, as well as ARPA money from the city of Cleveland and some philanthropic investment that's allowed us to do this. Our hope is that we will be a really good use case to highlight about the advancements in fixed wireless, so that we can then inform other cities that, you know, if you are, you know, you're now thinking with the complementary nature of fiber and fixed wireless, you're looking at this model in front of you to say, no, even in a large urban core like Cleveland, Ohio, they're building a competitive network, and it's stable. And yes, we are using the combination of licensed and unlicensed spectrum to do it, and it's a stable, reliable experience that we can absolutely swear by. Otherwise, we wouldn't be on this webinar.
and Joshua, let's build on what you said too, because Digital C, as you said, a nonprofit, was competing for city funds against several outstanding multinational telecom companies. And as you said, Cleveland is known as the Forest City of America, because of the heavy tree canopy and the challenges that that can be to traditional fixed wireless or any forms of communication. Why did you pick Tarana as your technology partner?
So one, great question. It's for a variety of reasons. And I'll also say that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jose Valdez. He's our Chief Operating Officer. He had led the decision-making on picking Tarana, convinced me, because I was a tough critic. I'm like, look, man, we have a lot of skepticism against us locally. All politics are local, so you all know that. And so the decision to go with Tarana was absolutely one of the biggest decisions that we were going to make as an organization. And one, it's the people. I mean, Carl is great to work with. He's very convincing. But even in addition to that, it was the willingness for the Tarana team to come out and actually work with our organization. Again, we're growing in our functions. We're embryonic in some cases. In other cases, we're more advanced. But on average, we're a growing organization, much more in parallel to a startup. And so we don't really have time in some cases to like go with 6 different vendors and see what's going to work best. We had to go with our gut and say, okay, this is the one we're going with. And thankfully, Tarana, they've been almost philanthropic with their time. They're not a nonprofit for sure, but they've been philanthropic with their time, and that they've been able to come in and teach our team how to actually deploy the technology. And whenever we've had issues, like they've been responsive. And they actually even did come out, and this is going to be something that I do believe is going to come up for many people as the BEAD money gets allocated. It will become political. And it's the fact that, Tarana was able to come to our public meeting and then to help us with our public messaging and say, no, this stuff does work. There's a reason why our service is called Canopy, because all the people who were skeptical of us said, can your technology penetrate the tree canopy? And we said, you know what, not only can it penetrate it, it refracts it, there's multipathing, it's everything, so therefore,
there you go.
It's Canopy. And so again, Tarana has just been a really great supportive partner, and the technology has absolutely acted in parallel to the great people over there.
Yeah, and a note on that, Carl, I just want to tie in on that. It's really gratifying to see how well it's performing in Cleveland. We actually have a lot of places where there's a fairly good tree cover. One of the things that was unique about Tarana when we first shipped the product is people wouldn't believe that it could do what it does until they actually saw it in the field. So one of the best things about BEAD right now is there's more than 100,000 homes on the service, and including in your network, where it's not anymore a question. People have to learn about it, but you can point to real data. We're in Florida, and there's places where we have 80% non-line of sight customers. So the technology does some really wacky things. Even if the leaves are blowing, whatever, it recalculates around all these obstacles in real time. So it's really gratifying to see the technology put to work, and especially in your project, which is it's an amazing project.
And I would mention, Joshua, and feel free to comment on this, but when I came out previously, that you had gathered Cleveland Mayor Biggs, the president of the city council, other members of the council, Governor Mike DeWine, Lieutenant Governor Husted. You have pulled together such a diverse network of leaders who believe in what you're doing and have seen what you're accomplishing and are backing you as you deliver for the 174,000 families that call Cleveland home. How did you pull together such diverse policy and political partners to believe in the work that you're doing, especially against, again, really respected multinational companies?
It absolutely was not easy. So whenever I say, I'm going to say probably like a really good answer. It's like, oh, wow. But for real, like it was not easy, and it won't be easy for anyone doing this. The wires and technology are easy. People are hard. And that is something that I am seeing every single day. And so the fact that we were able to get these people all aligned around this, I think it's really just, it was a value approach. Like we all value connectivity. Even from the state of Ohio standpoint, if Cleveland is underconnected in any way, that's bad for anybody in Ohio. Like a more connected Ohio is great for America. A more connected Cleveland is great for Ohio. And so as we begin making that messaging very clear to them, they're like, okay, well, we have a vested interest in seeing one of America's storied cities succeed and do something that we're not seeing in these other NFL, NBA style cities, where there's an alternative broadband company that was able to counter lobby and win. This doesn't happen really much at all. And so the fact that we were able to really communicate the vision, do the appropriate storytelling, and moving people from ideas to action. And I think idealistically, we've been for so long in this digital equity, broadband access, framing conversation that now we're on the precipice of actually deploying history. And it feels really great to be able to communicate that to a group of stakeholders who all want to win. Everybody wants to see this stuff succeed because everyone wants to, you're in your seat right now, you want to see this succeed. And so we were able to communicate that value. And that's what I'll say to anybody on the call who is going to be going through something historic, as well as these BEAD allocations are rolling out, that your public messaging and your storytelling are going to be one of your greatest decisions, second to your partner that you choose in your deployment and hardware side. And so just make sure that whatever you're doing, the intentionality you're doing in selecting, hopefully a Tarana partner, would be the same intentionality that you're going to put in crafting that story, that messaging, that branding, the stuff that's going to stick, and especially when things get tough. Because last year, things were tough before we got that funding, specifically from a lobbying side. So whomever you're in the fight with, they're not going to go easy, but absolutely the community, the communications and the storytelling and messaging are going to make a big difference.
And a couple of you have mentioned that seeing it is believing, experiencing it is believing. I'm going to ask if we can put up a slide without losing our 4 panelists. So as we look at our 50 states, Washington, D.C., and 5 territories, what we have found to be essential is to provide leaders, public, private, nonprofit, all stakeholders, a transparent view of technology. Remember, things are impossible until they're made possible, but people need to experience that themselves, and they deserve to do so. So we spend much of our time at Tarana traveling to tribal communities, rural, urban, and suburban communities throughout the United States so that leaders have a chance to experience the technology, ask hard questions, speak with a local trusted ISP partner like DigitalC, like NextLink, and then speak with families that are actually benefiting from that partnership, sitting down in living rooms and front yards and hearing from families. To date, Tarana has had the opportunity to have, in just the last 10 months, 36 Experiencing is Believing live technology deployment demonstrations in 19 different states. Those are the ones in blue, with another 8 states in green scheduled over the next 8 weeks. Because leaders deserve that with our taxpayer dollars to ensure that it's work and that it's helping working Americans better move forward with their lives and livelihoods. The logic behind our suggested bidding strategy is captured here. 1, most states will need fiber and more they're realizing that as they have put together and advanced their initial proposal, and they're in that back and forth process called curing with the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. So states that don't have sufficient funds, or it's just not geographically or topographically possible to do all fiber, they know it needs to be a fiber and solution. Second, math matters. Most states and territories will need to work the math to maximize their fiber while still reaching 100% of the unserved and underserved families in locations in their state. Third, because as Basil said, there's only 365 days from approval of volume 2 of the initial proposal to your final proposal is due. That means fewer bid rounds. So getting it right early on with either a fiber or hybrid bid right off the bat is going to help people be successful.
Right. So Carl, thanks for distilling that down. And just a few more specific comments about how this is all going to work in case you're engaged or thinking about getting engaged. First of all, and this is a couple more slides, and I think we're going to jump to Q&A, but there's some gating requirements you have to have in place in order to kind of participate in this, and you should have already been probably looking at these things if you're in a state that's getting close to a volume or has a volume 2 approved. Financial capability is one of the things. There's some cybersecurity items, operational capability readiness. So there are some gating items. I think that it's been a kind of ongoing conversation at NTIA with the states on making sure that organizations that to lower that bar enough where great organizations can all participate in the project. But there are some things you need to look at there, and they vary a little bit state by state. The 3 primary scoring criteria for BEAD, which is 75% of the total scoring, is the matching, number 1. So you're going to want to go to places where you're willing to do a match potentially. This, by the way, comes into play. It's a little bit of a complicated situation to face because you're not going to know exactly what the state can and will do until the first round of bids are in, and they're starting to look at how do they make the dual mandate work. In other words, getting as much fiber as possible, as Carl said, but also, serving 100% of the unserved and underserved. Affordability is another piece of it that has to do with the subscription fee that you're going to offer to customers, and there's some limitations there, or some specifics there, and then fair labor practices. This makes up 75% of the scoring. There's another 25% that are other terms, including the quality of the service. So if you can offer a better service, or that it will play, and the scoring is a little bit different state by state, by the way. So that's the third bullet. There is no one-size-fits-all strategy here because states are different. And the way this is being done is the states have different plans and different approaches. So there's 56 states and territories, and that leads to different approaches to solving the problem with some commonality. But I think that the key here is to get to know the states you're going to bid in well and understand what the scoring criteria are in that state and the gating requirements. And a few thoughts before we go to Q&A on how to handle this. First of all, some states are actually providing hybrid bids. So there's a set of areas that are defined, and you can bid fiber plus a fixed wireless technology like ngFWA. And we would highly recommend, if that's available, to do it, because what you're going to end up with is a better overall solution for that area, and you're going to get you'll get points for that. For states that have a single route of bidding, it's important to possibly offer, if you can, in that state, numerous bids across different geographies. Because one of the things we expect to happen here is there's going to be a first round of bids. And then there's likely in most states going to be a challenge as to how do we do those dual mandates. And there's going to be a negotiation phase of sorts. There's not enough time to do 5 rounds of bidding. So in some states are doing multiple rounds, but that'll be it. So there's going to be a situation where the state office needs to sort out how do I do this? And it's likely that they're going to engage the people who are already bidders and say, hey, let's do some horse trading and try to work out how to get the job done. And so for that reason, one of the thoughts we've been discussing with some of our customers is broadly bidding ngFWA. So you're in that conversation. We won't know until the bidding is done and the state is sorting out how to make sure coverage happens, how much horse trading needs to happen. Obviously, if a state gets enough match, enough bids to do all fiber, it's going to be done. In other words, there's a thing called the high cost per location threshold. If you beat the high cost per location threshold, you get the deal. That's a done deal. However, we're expecting that there'll be very few states where there's enough funds to fiber all of the unserved and underserved. And again, we've done a lot of modeling on that. Can't know till you're there. Matches could be different than our expectations. Costs could be different than our expectations. But everything we see says this is something where you, as a customer, as a bidder, want to have multiple bids or hybrid bids. Multiple bids meaning both fiber and wireless, or hybrid bids if possible. So some states offer that, where you're doing the right thing. And the hybrid bid's really important from our point of view, because actually in a free market situation, Wise County is a great example, what you really end up wanting to do is the combination. There's places you have to get fiber there anyway. There's places you fiber up, and then the rest you do with ngFWA. That ends up being the most economic and good long-term solution to the problem. So that ultimately will be the way this lands. It's just a question of how you get there. And then the last thing is, obviously, we highly recommend that you think about bidding higher speeds, because we can support that really well. and you'll get credit for that. It might make the difference in a bid between, you know, good enough and a winner. So with that said, I think that's the core of our presentation today, and I think it's time, Carl, we're going to go to some Q&A with that.
Yes. Yes, we are, and thank you. So we will be taking questions that I think our Stephen ngFWA and our marketing team are filtering through so that we avoid questions that repeat. Stephen, are you going to be sharing questions that are coming in with us?
You got it. You got it. So first one is for Joshua, which would be, what would you think about writing up a recipe book for how you succeeded in Cleveland so that others can do the same?
I like the idea. It's something that we've thought about in many ways. There's different types of engineering that we want to highlight. So for example, Jose coined this term, political engineering. And that is absolutely a thing that we have thought about. So yeah, you know, it's absolutely something that's top of mind for us. And all of the lessons that we're learning, we are learning a lot from growing and scaling this nonprofit WISP with a very local workforce. There's a lot that we are learning. We didn't even get to touch on like the installation process and everything there too. So would absolutely is something that we do consider, and one day hopefully that is going to be a good recipe that people would want to replicate versus, ew, what is that?
Great. Another one for Claude. If you're open to sharing, interested in hearing what your strategy is for BEAD.
Well, I think it, you know, kind of to Josh's point, it depends highly upon the different dynamics that you face on the ground in each state and locality in which you're looking to deploy, right? So something in a community just outside of Chicago is going to look very different than a community out in West Texas, right? And so there's sort of the local and state political situations you've got to navigate. There's different BEAD rules that you've got to navigate, and then there are different you know, geographic, topological, economic challenges that you've got to face in those different communities. So it's not a one size fits all approach. I can say we're definitely taking stock, and we have thoughts and strategies for each of the communities that we're engaged in. But it really is not a one size fits all solution, just like it's not a one size fits all technology solution either, right? It takes a variety of tools in the toolkit and approaches to get the job done, and that's kind of our strategy for BEAD. Happy to talk in more detail if there are narrower questions, but across a potential 12-state footprint, difficult to answer in a simple way.
Got it. On a sort of different angle, we've been seeing you know, life-changing outcomes from some of these Tarana deployments. What's your favorite story of a customer's experience?
Wow.
For, you know, and this is for Carl, for you as well as Joshua and Claude.
Okay, well, Stephen, well, let me share one. I knew I was in Florida when I was driving out to the family, and I passed Alligator Alley. So I knew I was in the Florida Everglades, and I had a chance to hear from a mom who ran her own business. Her husband was working from home during COVID, 2 teenage children, a son and a daughter, who were obviously studying from home at that point in the pandemic. And as she shared their experience of trying several technologies, all of them not meeting their needs, and then trying Tarana and our ISP partner in that part of Florida, she started crying. She was so moved by the truly life-changing impact that it had that she started crying. And that wasn't just because I was holding a bag of onions to try to get that reaction.
Although that did help. Yeah,
it did. But it really reminds me what we're doing is changing people's lives. Those aren't just numbers of unserved and underserved. Those are real people, our neighbors, our family, our friends, our coworkers that need us to get this right.
Any tears in Cleveland, Joshua?
There's plenty. There's plenty. You know, I was thinking through, because one of the things that we have to do, we do storytelling as a company a lot. But you know, there's been a lot of residents that we've been able to interact with, but there was one recently that I want to highlight, and I want to highlight it in a way where it might not be as sentimental, but it's actually going to showcase the network effect and the things that would challenge what we've seen in the past. So there was a street, then we did a lot of door knocking. Carl, this is before you agreed to sign up for door knocking, so don't worry. It's been a lot of door knocking we did. And as we were knocking on doors, we came across this one gentleman, and he was talking about how all the other internet providers were either A, too expensive, or they just didn't work, didn't have great quality. And we eventually connected him, and he actually went out and spoke to the council persons and said why Digital C was the right choice. And then we looked again, maybe a few months later. It's like a row of like 20 homes, almost like a cul-de-sac pattern. And every single one of those homes are our customers. And that's word of mouth. Though that is that customer who is so satisfied with us, he's now telling everybody across the street, he's telling everybody. And so now it's auto-populating in a way where, I hate to say this because I don't believe this is true in business all the time. When you build it, they will come. But when you build it right and you engage right, they absolutely will support. And I think that's the manifestation of that connection.
Excellent.
Huge.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say that we've had to do like you know, emotional sensitivity training with our install team, but we have had more than our fair share of tears stories from that our installers have brought back. I mean, it is true, right? If you are bringing a solution to somebody's life problems that they have, in some instances, they haven't realized how bad the problem has been until it's been solved. It's just an incredibly emotional moment for them. I mean, I think of the farmer in Nebraska that I talked to who told me that she had to stay up during, you know, harvest and sales season till like 2 to 3 a.m. every morning just to upload her crop data to market.
Great example.
Just to be able to sell the fruits of her labors, because she was on a fixed wireless connection that maxed out at less than a megabit per second, and now she has, you know, gigabit connectivity and she can sleep at night. I mean,
more sleep. Oh, you know, Carl, I got to pile on here because I know a guy, me, who got involved. I've been building communications equipment my whole career. Started with semiconductors, and when I met the Tarana guys, I live in Los Gatos here in Silicon Valley, and I had 0 options for broadband. So I was talking about stranded streets. Literally, I had 7 meg DSL, no fiber, no cable. We weren't dense enough where my house is, so I had to use a traditional fixed wireless, and I was getting 20 megabits per second, 25 at times. And when they first met Tarana, one of the things I said, we were going through the technical presentation, I said, why don't you come to my house? And they came up on a weekend and installed a node. This was a prototype node. It was working at half speed. And they got 170 megabits per second on my lawn. And I have not been off of Tarana service since. So I started crying. I'll admit it. I'm not afraid to admit it.
Well, we want to thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank our partners, Joshua Edmonds, the visionary CEO of Digital C in Cleveland, Claude Aiken, who's done so much in his career at the FCC, at WISPA, and at Nextlink Internet, and of course, our CEO at Tarana Wireless, Basil Alwan. Please follow up with us. We want to meet this goal together of 100% universal service. Every American unserved and underserved family. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Let's make it work. Thank you all for joining us.